Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. Welcome. It's Tuesday on Ask the Theologian. I'm very glad you have joined us. Off yesterday after a busy weekend, catching my breath, basically, and doing a little hosting here at Taos, locally as well. So here we are. We're back. Hey, a different schedule this week, just a little bit. We will have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of Ask the Theologian. I will be off on Friday. We will have Wednesday night of Bible study, the Gospel of John. We will not have Thursday night this week only, and it's due to my traveling to Iowa. This is the weekend for the Wall Lake Baptist Church Fall Bible Conference. Joel Fink and I will be there with Pastor Barney, and looking forward to that. If you're anywhere in the neighborhood of Wall Lake, Iowa, come on and join us. We would love to see you. And so I'll be off Thursday night and Friday morning for our broadcasting. But anyway, glad to see each one of you here today. And indeed, you are a blessing. Hope you enjoyed the Bible conference. It's time for our rifleman question of the day. Here we go. Acts chapter 16, verses 17 through 18. And doesn't that music in the background just make it all sound so much more majestic? That's it, majestic. There we go, the rifleman question of the day. I don't see my mug. I've cleaned the office. Now I got to find the mug. We don't need the lion roaring. There we go. Let's go. Russell and Kent asked the question, Acts chapter 16, verses 17 and 18. Says, the same followed Paul and us, cried, saying, these men are the servants of the Most High God, which show us unto the way of salvation. This did she many days. This is the girl that was possessed. So she does this many days. But Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the Spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out of her that same hour. Now, our question, is there a difference between the word spirit and devil used in the gospel, casting out a devil versus casting out a spirit of divination? I think they might be used interchangeably, but let's check it out here. So again, we have this girl here being grieved, Paul being grieved, turned and said to the Spirit. Now that is the word pneuma. Pneuma could be used for my spirit and your spirit and the spirit of this program and the spirit of 76 and, the spirit of St. Louis, and you name it. The very broad word, pneuma. It can also be used just in terms of air or breath or even wind. And we think of pneumatic tools, comes from that same pneuma. So that one in itself is a pretty broad word. It earlier in the passage, if I am not mistaken, calls it, in one verse earlier, calls it this spirit of divination, as you see here. So here we have, again, there we go. Yeah, spirit is pneuma. Divination, puthon. Okay, who's the guy? One of the TV preachers wrote a book. I think it might have been Jensen Franklin, but I hate to throw the wrong guy under the bus, so I may be wrong. But I think it was Jensen Franklin wrote a book about the python spirit. Comes from this word right here, pneuma puthonus. And the U sometimes getting to English becomes a Y, so python. And you think in the, in India where they're doing the divination with the snake, it all comes together there through that. So it modifies the spirit. This is a divination spirit. Let's look into that word just a little bit more. Puthones, and let's pull that up in the Strong's Concordance. Okay, from Putho, the name of the region where Delphi, the seat of the famous oracle, was located. In Greek mythology, the name Pythian serpent or dragon that dwelt at the region of Pytho at the foot of Parnassus, if I'm pronouncing all that right, and was said to have guarded the oracle of Delphi and slain by Apollo. Okay, so I think by the use of that word, the biblical writer is saying this is Greek mythology, this is not Christianity at all. So here she is consumed by this or wrapped up in this or walking in this. Now, to the question, is there a difference between spirit and devil? Yes. Daimones versus pneuma. Both of them can be used broadly. Daimonos, most of the time, in fact, I think all the time in the King James is translated as devil or devils, never as demon, but it's because the English language developed that word later. And so in 1611, the only word was Satan, devils. And even today in my part of the world, there's at least, and I'm sure in other parts of the world too, there's a lot of mascots that are like the Sun Devils. Santa Fe High School, I believe. No, Espanola Valley is the Sun Devils. Santa Fe High School is the Demons. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that's not talking about the big Satan, but it's these little Satans. So that word daimonos was used, but I think as far as I remember, daimonos is always an evil term, whereas spirit is not always an evil term. But here it's narrowed down into that. So casting out a devil versus casting out a spirit of divination, I think you could use that interchangeably. I think this is what she has. I don't think you could build enough theology to put that any kind of separation in it, other than daimonos is a more narrow word than pneuma, and this is the reason why it has to be defined as a spirit of divination. By the way, this is the only time that particular word is used there. They've got a marginal note that says, or of Python. There we go. But you'd have to know your Greek history to know what Python meant. Thank you. And, it's interesting. She was shouting out what was true. Verse 17, these men are servants of the Most High God, which show unto us the way of salvation. And Paul relieved her of that. Now, what she was saying was exactly true. And one announcement might have been friendly, but this was not one announcement. This was disruptive. And Paul begins to change that. Thanks coming from England. I appreciate that. Let's look at Manny in San Antonio. Is all of Matthew chapter 24 about Daniel's 70th week except verse 4? And is this a tribulation, is the tribulation a purge for Israel in reference to Jeremiah 31:31? Okay, so let's look at this just a little bit. Let's go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 4, just to start out with the exception. Take heed that no man deceive you. Okay, that is one of those that very well could be directed toward the tribulation and yet would be applicable anytime. If we were doing the entire New Testament in the as the way Charles the Instigator would have us to do, in blue letters, green letters, black letters, I would take verse 4, and that could be green letter. Take heed that no man deceive you. Green letter is, it's not really about us living today. It's not about Manny in San Antonio, but it sure applies. Manny in San Antonio and Randy in Taos ought to take heed that no man deceive you, because deception is such a subtle thing. This is what the devil did in the Garden of Eden. It is so, it's guile. It is not being fully forthright. And that can be, again, that it's an easy trap to get into. So I would say that I would take verse 4 here, I would put it in its context and say directly that's what it's referring to. Is it the tribulation? Let's see here in just a moment. Directly, that's what it's referring to, but indirectly, it would be very applicable. Now, you possibly could take some other verses like verses 5 and 6. Many shall say, I am Christ and shall deceive many. There are people down through the ages who have done that. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, that kind of describes history, doesn't it? So you could take some of this and put it together. I think that when you take this, you begin to see, as we go down, let's get to verse 8, all of these are the beginning of sorrows. And then, so I really would say Daniel's 70th week begins with then, not with the beginning of sorrows. Now, I would put all of this post-rapture. This is where my eschatological chronology differs a little bit from, let's say, standard dispensationalism. In that standard, thanks, Russell. You put the mug between beneath your desk last week, maybe a draw. Oh, like a quick draw. Actually, I did, but it's still not. All of my mugs are missing. I'm gonna have to figure that out. Sorry, I got distracted in the question. But I totally cleaned last week because we had company. It was the prophecy conference. People were going to be coming in and looking, and so things had to look nice. And I just don't remember where I put anything, including my wallet, if anyone has seen that. But sorry, back to the question. My chronology is a little bit different in that I do not start the rapture or insist upon the beginning, the tribulation. I do not insist on beginning the tribulation immediately after the rapture. I put a little gap in there. I often call it the soon telos. These things are together with the end, and we find that in the scriptures as well. These things are together with the end, but they're not the end. Here these are the beginning of sorrows. So I would put verses, say 4 through 8, when Jesus begins talking, as post-rapture, but prior to the actual 70th week of Daniel. So Matthew chapter 24 includes more than the 70th week of Daniel, but nothing within the church age. That's my position there. I hope that helps clarify that just a little bit. And basically it's right. You could say all of Matthew 24 is in the 70th week of Daniel. If you don't put seals 1 through 4 as of the book of Revelation, if you don't put those in the 7 years, as I don't, I put them before the 7 years, then Matthew chapter 24 is post-rapture, not always 70th week. Thank you very much. Debbie in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, I surely enjoyed the Pyramid Conference. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. We had some good fellowship here locally. That was always fun. We ate some good food. That was always fun. But I enjoyed studying. I'd like to refine it a little more. I'd like to do a little more study on it. I'd like to find a simple way. I almost want a little book that you could look at the index and say, distance of the Earth to the sun. Where'd that calculation come from? Sidereal calculations, 28,000 years. And just a little kind of math chart that shows the pyramid. Here's where it is. Shows it on Earth on an index page, and you could volume of the Earth's oceans. There it is. So it would make a nice little reference piece and make it easy to do without going into a lot of stuff through that. So I may refine that one of these days. It's my theme song. One of these days. Now, going on, Debbie says, I can't help but see a connection between the Great Pyramid and Nimrod's attempt to build the tower to the heavens. In your research and study, did you find anything like that? No, I didn't, but I actually did look for it because it seemed to me as well. Now, the one thing that ties together is that this is very close to the time of Nimrod. And I would even say Nimrod was still alive when this was done. If we go with the timing that I went, which I think is better than anything else, though again, still you can't prove it, I would say you've got Nimrod building the Tower of Babel, and then you've got the scattering of the nations at Babel, and then immediately after that scattering, you have Job building this monument. Now, the question is Job building the monument in honor of God, or more like Nimrod, against God, and yet ends up being used for God? I think it's in honor of God, totally, because I think Job from the beginning is not one who went the Nimrodian way, but maybe Job is saying, look, guy Nimrod over there tried to build a tower that was a monument to man. I'm going to build one that is a monument to God. His is not going to last, or his did not last. Mine will last. I think you could work through that. Now, it would be interesting to see if you could, if anyone else has come up with that. I did not read it in Seiss. I don't think he mentions it. Now, I haven't read every word because I didn't dig deeply into the last two halves, and so maybe he brings that up there of the book that Seiss has. And furthermore, as I mentioned several times in the conference, there are dozens of more books that a person could go into. So I wouldn't want to say that, nobody has ever thought through that or argued against that, or pro or con argued that. It would be interesting. I think it kind of goes together, that there's some, maybe even correspondence, because God so often makes things parallel. And so here, again, the tower to man, the tower to God. The one to man doesn't last. The one to God does. I think there could be some interesting study there. And check that out. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate that. And let's go with the instigator with the fine suit and red tie, back from his working days. During the study of the pyramids, you said France was the instigator who made the meter measuring system. Has anyone tried to change the time system, 60 seconds to the minute and 60 minutes to the hour? Now, that's a good question. There are, I know of some attempts within business. Often a time clock, for example, will go on a minute divided into 100 parts. Now, all of that obviously is just to shave a little bit closer in the payroll, and of course it might make a difference if you have 100,000 employees. Rather than go to the second, go to the 1/100th rather than the 1/60th. Of a minute. So, but even at that, they still go on a 24-hour clock. The military system, of course, or even the European system goes on a 24-hour clock. I don't know. Let's dig into that. That would be interesting. You would almost think that the metric system would have taken what is a created order of the calendar. And, we go on the Gregorian calendar today, and the Gregorian calendar, of course, is named after Pope Gregory. So you would think that someone would try to eradicate that. The Gregorian calendar does not go on the lunar calendar, otherwise we would be on the Jewish months. It goes on a solar calendar. but could there be any way in which they have tried to do that and tried to make it more of a metric system? It would almost be impossible to get 365 and a quarter down to division of 10. So what would they do? How would they do the days and the months? The hour is easier, and the hour has been done on a business scale. Very intriguing question. Let's dig into it. Let's see. I think it's Chris and Forney, but I'm not sure. CGTRBC has the question. Can we talk about Jeremiah 29 and how it's getting abused as to Christians trying to create parallel societies? That may that could go a whole bunch of directions. There's the miniature parallel. Oh, it is Chris. Okay, good. There's the miniature parallel society that, let's say, the Catholic Church started out, and the Catholic Church is kind of a parallel society, trying to be the society. And of course, that spilled into evangelicalism, and that spilled into, say, the Seven Mountain Mandate. And so you've got, if we are the people of the new covenant in Jeremiah 31, then let's build this new society. However, I think, and I suspect this is where Chris is going on it, you could go well beyond the mild kind of parallel society that you have, say, in evangelical or Christian conservatism, really into almost a cultic kind of parallel society. And that would be interesting to see, to dig into some of these, again, parallel societies and see almost always what I would call, let's say it's kind of a cultic kind of society based upon the Bible. I would say almost always those are going to make the people of that parallel society to be the Jewish people, to be the chosen ones. So the Jews aren't the Jews, we're actually the Jews. The Jews are the bad guys, we're the good guys. The Jews don't have the favor of God, we're the people with the favor of God. The Jews aren't getting the kingdom, we're getting the kingdom. And so there is that kind of an anti-Semitism, whether it's spoken or not spoken, whether the hatred shows through or doesn't show through, it still pushes them off and makes us. So you've got, let's say, what do they call them? The Black Israelites, that movement, and a number of these other movements. I would say if you followed their theology, if you got down into their writings, my guess is you're going to trace back to Jeremiah chapter 31, because they've got to have this covenant with God in order to build that parallel society, and none of the other covenants fit. You can't stick yourself under the Abrahamic covenant or the Mosaic covenant, or the Noahide covenant is somewhat universal anyway, and so it doesn't serve you any purpose. And carries that out in an odd way. Thank you. I think you're on target for your thinking there. Charles says, how can I add a URL to my message? Did we? That is, you can't put a URL in the chats right now. Is that correct? Nathan's going to test that. At one time you couldn't. And he was trying to make it where you could, because we want people to be able to share websites. So he's working on it as we speak, and checking on that. Will you be in the pulpit in Taos on Sunday, October 17th? We plan to visit that weekend. Very good. Might even be up for buying green chili cheeseburgers Saturday evening. Well. I will be in the pulpit on the 17th. And I need to check one thing. I've got a little run to Albuquerque to pick up something. And I got to check the date on that and make sure it's not the 16th. It's on a Saturday. So let me check that. So hopefully that Saturday works. But I'll check that. I will be preaching, however, on the 16th. And I'm almost sure that even if I have to go to Albuquerque, I'll be back in time. So let's check that. From Western Oklahoma, he's buying double green chili cheeseburgers for any who come to Taos that weekend. Charles and I conspired together to get Chuck to buy all of you a double green chili cheeseburger. Let's see what comes of that. Thanks. Appreciate the good question there. Okay. Let's. I tell you what. Let's go down on the train right now to. There we go to Cucamonga. Here we are to Michael in Rancho Cucamonga. Is Paul preaching the gospel of the kingdom in Acts 16:31, or is this before the revelation? Let's check that out. Acts chapter 16, verse 31. Is this mystery or is this kingdom? You know, there we go. Brought it up. This is the Philippian jailer. They let me back up one verse. The Philippian jailer, sirs, what must I do to be saved? They said, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved, and thy house. Now, let me stop just a moment right here. This is always presented as the mystery gospel. Believe in the Lord Jesus and you'll be saved. Every now and then you'll find a right divider who says, no, it's not. I think it is. I think this is this is not the gospel of the kingdom. There's something that hints to the gospel of the kingdom here in just a moment. And that's probably what you picked up on. I think this is the mystery gospel, the grace gospel, the belief and belief alone, faith alone gospel. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved, and thy house. Now, when you go on, they spake unto him the word of the Lord, and to all that were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night, and washed their stripes, and was baptized. All his straightway. Okay, this is what causes some people to say, no, this is the kingdom gospel. Now, I want to, and this may take me just a moment here, I want to pull my notes up on this particular issue. Yeah, I'm going to have to change a setting here real quick. But I think that issue of baptism, again, is why some say, no, this is not the mystery gospel, because the mystery gospel does not bring about, the mystery gospel does not involve a baptism. Now, there we go. Now let's see. Yes, I was successful in bringing my notes up on the screen. Here they are in the center. Acts 16:33. He took them, they were baptized. Okay, here's what I said in the middle of the screen. The jailer ministered to Paul and Silas. Neither Paul or Silas not told, either Paul or Silas baptized he and all his. While baptism began as a Jewish ritual of cleansing and repentance, it appears that at this time it is being used outside of Jewish life, unrelated to the Jewish faith, and associated with the gospel of the uncircumcision. Where were they baptized? Very possibly the same river at which Lydia was found praying, but it could have been any pool of water. Okay. So my position is right here. Now, this would cause some right dividers to cough up a lung. But my position is, again, it appears that at this time, baptism is used outside of Jewish life, unrelated to the Jewish faith, associated with the gospel of the uncircumcision. That is to say that baptism changed in its meaning. Now, I think your only choices are to say that, and somebody help me if there's another choice, is to say this is the kingdom gospel. He preached the kingdom gospel to the Philippian jailer, not in a synagogue, Gentile, unrelated to the things of the Jewish faith. Here he's taking a random Gentile outside of the synagogue and bringing him into the kingdom faith. Seems a stretch to me. Or baptism has become something that has meaning outside of the Jewish faith and within the Pauline faith. I think it did. I think that whereas Paul clearly disassociates baptism from the gospel, that is, he is able to say, God has not sent me to baptize, but to preach the gospel. So you can do one without the other. Now, with that, then I think you would have to come and say, he clearly disassociates them. He clearly does not at all require baptism. But at the same time, Paul never he never prohibits baptism, as I see it. And I think even sometimes uses baptism as here. Now, you could argue that Silas was the one doing baptism, but you've only got Paul and Silas here. And so that's all you've got to deal with and all you've got to work with. So I think, in Acts chapter 13, 38 and 39, you've got the Pauline gospel. I think he's got the mystery. So you either have to take an Acts 28 position, which there's some out there who do, who says Paul in Acts chapter 16 still does not have the mystery, in which case he would be giving the kingdom gospel. But very few people push it off that far. So if he's got the mystery gospel, the gospel of the uncircumcision, I can understand when he goes into a synagogue, he would still preach the things of the Jew. To the Jews, I became a Jew. And so if he's in the synagogue and there happens to be Gentiles there, God-fearing Gentiles who haven't yet converted, but they're considering it, well, yeah, I can see him preaching to a God-fearing Gentile in the synagogue the things of the circumcision. That's the room in which he's at. But to be in the jail, unrelated to the synagogue, here's a guy who, I don't know if he knows anything about Judaism, and to think that somehow is the kingdom gospel. I think that's a pretty hard claim, hard to prove there. Thanks, Rancho Cucamonga. I appreciate it. So the question is, Paul preaching the gospel of the kingdom? I don't think so. Is this before the time of Revelation? I don't think so. I think he's got the mystery gospel there. Thanks very much. I appreciate the good question always from Rancho Cucamonga. Let's go up to Idaho Falls, Idaho. Stephen, good to see you. The pyramid studies this weekend were fantastic. Why, thank you very much. As I already mentioned today, I really enjoyed studying it. It's one of those, I knew I wanted to study it, but I knew that, you only got so many hours in a day, and you got to study for what do you call it? Sermons, and that's the pressing need. So I've learned if I want to study something, I just schedule to speak about it, because that forces me. In fact, we've got Daniel Vandenberg here as our live studio audience from Muskegon, Michigan. He was our pianist, and pianist slash plumber slash this morning changed the lock on the door. What do you call a person who changes the lock on the door? There's a word. Locksmith, thank you. Jack of all trades. I was telling him, we were talking about this series I'm in right now, 30 Amazing Bible Stories You May Not Know. I told him I could have called it 30 Amazing Bible Stories I'd Like to Study. Things I haven't studied before, I want to study. Okay, I'll stick it in that sermon series. So that's sort of my MO. I don't know if that's good or not. Okay, I got off topic there. I haven't got to the question yet. But amen. He says this was standard stuff for serious Bible students a century ago. And so true. That a century ago, it was in kind of, books that sold in the Christian bookstore a century ago. I know that thing probably didn't exist, but nonetheless, that they gathered together and they studied all these things. So with that, then, I wanted to check the dictionary. This was standard stuff a century ago. I agree. Why do you think areas like this are verboten today? Did I pronounce that right?
Verboten.
I did.
Verboten.
There we go. Verboten. I pulled it up so I'd have a good definition. Not permitted or allowed, forbidden or prohibited by or as if by authority. Excellent word. Let's use that this week, can we? Let's make that the word for the week, verboten. Because you could have easily said, why are things like this forgotten today? And they are forgotten. But I would say they're beyond forgotten. They're verboten. That is, you're really not supposed to talk about stuff like this. That's why I had to give, or I felt the need to give, I don't know if I had to, but I had to give kind of an apology on why are we doing the pyramids? I mean, and you all heard me. If you heard me advertising this, I got a new series. This is a weird one. You're going to think I've been out in the sun too long. All those kind of apologies, because in my mind, I knew this was verboten. The evangelical authority does not allow us to study things like that. Even it would have been session number 5, the regular Bible study hour on Sunday morning. My whole argument was these things ought to be considered within the doctrinal parameter. My whole argument was we have narrowed down what doctrine is, and therefore the as if by authority people, they have come together and said, no, it's not in the list of 10 things. Sorry, you can't study that. Prohibited. Why? I think that one of the reasons, and obviously it's a speculative kind of thing, and why issues, as we said 1,000 times, are the hardest things to answer. But the church certainly has separated physics out of theology. And so the things of the physical world are not that's not a spiritual topic. And let's not talk about that. And I think that 100 years ago, in the days of a classical education, at least, even as it was kind of modified along the years, in the days of a classical education, all of the liberal arts, which certainly would have included the understanding of the physical world and astronomy and geometry, which, the pyramidology is just a really kind of a a marriage of astronomy on the one hand and geometry on the other, and putting those two together. So 100 years ago, the guy with only an 8th grade education would have understood geometry very well, and a little bit he had to understand geometry very well because he probably was a farmer and he had to figure out how much seed is it going to take for this odd-shaped lot that I've got, field that I've got, and how long can the ox pull until, all those kind of things. He had to do those calculations in his head, and he knew those things much more so than we do today, in which now, for the most part, you take someone under 30 years old and they can't even read a map because you don't need to read a map anymore. And so we're losing a lot of, in all of our technology, we're losing a lot of our brain power, which does not speak well for society in the future. But at that point, to get back to my point, at that point, 100 years ago, and probably you need to go even farther than 100 years ago, but at that point 100 years ago, geometry was theological. And therefore, they did talk about it. And, Larkin's section in the book on dispensationalism was not a weird thing. It was an expected thing. And Seiss is the pastor of a Lutheran church in Philadelphia, a well-known pastor of the Lutheran Church in Philadelphia. It was kind of expected that he would talk about things like he wrote a book about the stars. Wrote a very good. Bullinger has a book about the witnesses of the stars. Bullinger really kind of like I borrowed from Seiss for the pyramids. Bullinger borrowed from Seiss for his book on the witness of the stars. Seiss wrote his first. Seiss is much more scientific, much more difficult to read because of that, much more kind of above our head. Bullinger kind of dumbed down Seiss in his book on the witness of the stars. And it was expected that you would talk about stars, you would talk about pyramids, you would talk about numbers, all those things that are all verboten today. So my argument would be, let's whoever those as if by authority, forbidden or prohibited as if by authority, whoever those authorities are, let's forget about them. Let's have the Society of Forgotten Verbotenism. How's that? We're going to take those things that are verboten and we're going to dig into them. That's why we question the assumptions, right? I have that mug. Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. I really do. As I mentioned earlier in the program, I plan to refine this. I have been asked to come out to California next spring, and do a pyramid conference. Not really as a result of, I would say. Someone brought it up to me several years ago. Pastor Jerry Cook brought it up several years ago, and he's been wanting me to do one, and I never had studied it. So I kind of had to study it so that I could, fulfill the invitation that's kind of been open-ended for a long time. And after this weekend, he said, March, there it is. So March 2022. How can it already be there? Nicholas Bolingbroke, another pyramid question. Why was the upper chamber called the king's chamber and the other chamber called the queen's chamber? I didn't find any answer, but here I'm going to give you my speculation. I think that the first guy that got there gave it the name. And I don't know that I would put a lot of weight on that particular name. If the first guy that had gotten there had named it the upper chamber and the lower chamber, or chamber A and chamber B, whatever they would have named it, it probably would have stuck. But we ought to, if we could check, and we could, it would just take a little study, to go back and see when did they start calling it the king's chamber and the queen's chamber. Was that Egyptologists that called it that? because they might have called it that because other pyramids were burial pyramids and had the king's chamber and the queen's chamber. There is zero evidence that the Great Pyramid is a burial chamber. But they might have, as an Egyptologist, might have come in and said, it's a pyramid, that's a burial chamber, it's a burial mausoleum, where's the chamber for the king, where's the chamber for, this is what we find in pyramids. So it might not even be good terminology. It might have come from, as I say, an Egyptologist who would have brought that thinking into their mind. Or did it come from some kind of Christian thinking? Someone like a Seiss, I don't think it came from Seiss. I think it came much earlier than that. But, if it was someone like Seiss, then we might say, okay, well, he's thinking the queen and the bride in some sort, and he's bringing his theological look into that rather than his Egyptologist look into that. So where did that come from? I don't really know. If I knew who did it first, then I would probably know why they did it, because I would know their frame of reference. And I think that if you look to other pyramids that, again, are cheap copies of the Great Pyramid, I think you're going to find that they have a king's chamber and a queen's chamber. I suspect that the name just came from, again, Egyptologists who took other cheap versions of the pyramid. They had already been calling them that when they discovered, and it was 825 AD before they went inside the pyramid. And that's when they went in the wrong entrance. We didn't talk about that much, but they bored a hole in the entrance, and finally found something on the inside. So 825 AD, but they had already been inside a lot of other pyramids by that point. And so I suspect by 825 AD, when Muslims finally broke in and got in, that they were already calling King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber. And therefore, it's more Egyptology than it is anything else. And we've just adopted the terminology since then. That's again, it's a little bit of my speculation there. Thank you. Do you recommend Walter? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Veiths. You're from up there with all those people with strange names. Do you know how you'd pronounce that? It's probably German, maybe. Weiths. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but let's see. Because there's a website here, amazingdiscoveries.org. Now, let me say, the question is, do you recommend? And I'm going to have to say no, because I don't know who he is. But maybe we'll find something here. Exposing deceptions, affirming the truth. In an age where deceptions run loose and relativism is thriving, people are seeking real answers to life's questions. More than ever, it's time to discover what you've been seeking. Okay. Real answers to deepest questions. Looks like he's got a podcast, Truth Matters, designed to bring life-changing information to those who have never heard it before. Look behind the scenes at what is influencing current events today. Climate change, beekeeping, 8 laws of health, Islam, paganism and the Olympics, latest prophetic news. Israel admits that half of new COVID cases in the last month were fully vaccinated. mRNA vaccine inventor concerned over adolescents receiving vaccine. Okay. Here is, let's see if they've got any kind of a statement of faith. I don't see one, though it could easily be hidden in there somewhere. And I don't know what I'm agreeing to there, so I probably just won't agree to all that. But here's my suspicion. And I may be very wrong on this, so if so, apologies to Walter, we'll call him. Walter. I think it sounds like What I would suspect if I were to dig into this, and this would be my assumption, and it may be proven untrue. What I would suspect is you've got someone with a scientific, inquisitive mind, and that the facts as presented are going to be true, accurate, as far as you can prove the accuracy of those facts. And so sometimes it might be a little bit of speculation, because sometimes we can only speculate on the final issues of the facts. But I'm going to give it a green light for facts. This is a guess, a green light for facts. However, where I would, where my little discernment sniffer comes out here, is in the connection of those facts to what is going on today. I think that it's easy to point out this list of facts and then use that as the basis for, why Joe Biden does what he does or says what he says, or, why this thing in Afghanistan happened, or whatever, and make some connections of facts to current events that may not be so accurate, that involve a lot of assumptions. And the reason I say that, again, the things that look in there, I mean, again, as you look at some of this, truth matters and whatnot, and that all kind of looks like he's looking at the physical world around us, and so probably very good. When you get down here, in some of these articles here, like paganism and the Olympics, he might be doing a non sequitur. It does not follow. And that is to say, the original Olympiad back 2,000 plus years ago was rife with paganism. They had, I don't even know the origin of the five circles, but let's pretend like I do. They had, 5 rings that they put together here, and at the end of the day, they went and bowed down to Athena, and therefore the Olympics in Japan in 2021 is the worship of Athena. I'm not all that thrilled about that kind of a conclusion. And you get the same thing when you come to, we'll approach Christmas here in a few months, and, pagans one time decorated a tree, and therefore a tree is pagan, and if you have a tree, you too are pagan. I don't totally go there. And I think it's interesting to know where paganism maybe influenced our society, but, Thursday was named after Thor, and we have Bible study on Thursday night, therefore we're pagan. Obviously, we have things in our society that were connected to paganism. Now, again, we're just talking about the headline only, paganism and the Olympics. And he may be saying the same thing I did if I just read the article. I don't know. But I see a lot of reading into eisegesis of society. And I see it in a lot of sites like this. So, you get 8 laws of health. I don't know if there are 8 laws of health. And who wrote those laws? Are these biblical laws? Are these verboten laws? That what is it? Did these come from the CDC? I don't know. But I'm always a little bit hesitant when you come out there and 8 laws of health. And well, again, I think he's just wanting cookies. Here, I'll do a not now. There we go. Is this 8 things right here? Okay, nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, trust. A voodoo guru could have written that. Or a right-wing Christian could have written that. I mean, there's nothing that's necessarily biblical. You gotta have water if you're gonna be healthy. You gotta have some sunlight. Now, again, probably what he says there is factually true. Is it overstated? Is the conclusion overstated? These are the 8 laws of health. There are not 9, there are not 7, there are 8 laws of health. If you do these things, you're going to be healthy. It's in the connection of those things that worries me. So, again, this is a shall we say, it's an ignorant analysis, a self-described ignorant analysis. Because you can't judge a ministry based upon looking at their website and clicking one button. So it's an ignorant analysis. I think it looks like an intriguing website. Let me add one more thing. Sometimes when we get into these kind of things, they are so intriguing that we'll spend the next 6 or 8 weeks getting into that, and then we say, I know this. I know the secrets to the Olympics and why you should not watch them, and we begin to build a lot of legalisms into our lives, and we begin to build a lot of unfounded laws into our lives, and this, that, and the other, and we begin to put some of this together, and we spend the 6 or 8 weeks not doing any Bible study. I think if you just do week-by-week Bible study as your steady diet, or day-by-day Bible study as your steady diet, that will expose deceptions and affirm the truth in and of itself. And you will, without studying, principles of health, you'll come out a person who lives fairly healthy. So I would go at it a different way, I think. Now, again, I want to, sorry for all the disclaimers there, but I would hate for someone to judge my ministry based upon, what they saw on the front page. So could be very good. That's how I would sniff it out. Thanks, Bev, in St. Croix County, Wisconsin. Always good to see you. Thank you very much. And let's see. Chris has a good thought. How about sometime we do a session on the temple? Because there also, within the temple, is a lot of testimony. A testimony to what God has carried out. I have a book somewhere, and I studied this book. I'm trying to look over there, see if I can see the book, and I don't. There was a book on the tabernacle. And honestly, I think the better study would be the tabernacle than the temple. Though a session on the temple in a study on the tabernacle would be good, because the temple was built upon the model of the tabernacle, but not exactly. They changed some things. And so to see where they changed some things, for example, the laver in the temple is 50 times bigger than the laver in the tabernacle. Okay, let's think about some of those things. But within the tabernacle, there is so much in there. Why is there 30 pillars on one side and 10 pillars on the other? And why are they capped in silver? And why do they have the base of brass? All those things, I think, do have some great meaning to it, and would be fascinating. I tell you, one time I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you had a mobile tabernacle? The tabernacle was mobile, so you could do it. You put it in the trailer out back, and unlike they would have done in the Exodus days, but you put it in a trailer. You travel to some town. You go to a church parking lot, and you get a few volunteers, and you set up the tabernacle as you're teaching it. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? Don't you think that'd be cool? Yeah. Sure. You set up the tabernacle, you have your workers, you tell them what to do, you set up, and as they're setting it up, you teach, here's what all of this meant. And then at the end, they have the opportunity to go and tour the tabernacle. It would just be fascinating, and I decided it'd be $50,000 too. But nonetheless, it'd be fascinating. So, yeah, I think that you've got you got a good one that ought to be done there. Thanks. Jim, South Carolina. If the layout of the pyramid represents God's plans for the ages, which I believe it is, do you find it interesting that the Zionist movement really started after 1872? When the Queen's air chambers were unblocked. Now that's very interesting because I did not put a date on when those air chambers were unblocked. So thanks for doing that research there. That's very, very interesting that when the air starts coming into the Queen's chamber, and I did put it as, this is sort of the, what would you say, the holding place for Israel, and how it was putrid in terms of the air. So I'm going to take that as accurate, and I think it is that at 1872, okay, then finally some fresh air comes in, and that really is very much right at the time that the Zionist movement begins to take place, and there begins to be some modern life to the Jewish nation. Prior to 1872, there was there were Jews. There was no formal interconnection and no real attempt to say, let's be a nation again. Very, very interesting point there. And a great point that Jim says also, technology exploded after that, Industrial Revolution and all the things that took place there. And I would suspect that if you analyzed the industrial and the technological revolution, 1872 to present, what percentage of that would go to Jews? Jewish technology, Jewish discovery, Jewish research and development, probably a huge percentage. Be very interesting. And Jim, who ran the torch through New Mexico to the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles. He says he was not a pagan. But Jim, I don't know. Pagans held torches. But you were running west. Pagans would run to the east. So maybe you were only semi-pagan. Got to have a little fun with it, right? Speaking of the tabernacle, I bought a kit from Emmaus Bible College and built it along with my youth Bible study group. That was 50 years ago. I use a small model now when I teach. I probably, you used to be able to buy, and I suppose you can still today buy these models. And tabletop model, not the parking lot model, but here's one that there we go. The Tabernacle Place sells a model for $54.95. Easy to assemble, detailed and accurate, 328 pieces. It looks. Looks accurate from what I have seen. You've got the pillars. I would assume it's got all the right numbers. It's capped in silver. It's based in bronze. You've got the 5 pillars out front. That is correct. You've got, it looks like, the right markings on that. So this might be pretty accurate. Somebody would want to look into all of that and see the easy to scale model. They say 1 to 90. And that would be a fascinating study, not only for children, but for adults. You could just gather around a little table and say, let's build this as Jim teaches us on the tabernacle, or to be able to point to. Maybe it's one of those things every church ought to have. Interesting. Thanks for your word there. Well, I am out of time, and I think I got all the questions for today, but very grateful that you have decided to study with us today, or learn, or think, or contemplate with us today. We will be back tomorrow at this same time, and we'll do Ask the Theologian. We'll be back tomorrow night for the Gospel of John. We'll be back Thursday morning, and then I will be off Thursday night and Friday, making my way to Iowa. We will have a broadcast Sunday morning, a single broadcast rather than two broadcasts from 10:45 through there. So I appreciate all that. Again, thanks for being with us. I'm Randy White on this Tuesday.